We are gathered here today to read the last will and testament of Yolanda Monique Holloway. 800 people packed St. Augustine's Cathedral. Senators, CEOs, old money Atlanta royalty. Everyone who mattered had come to pay respects to the wife of Cedric Holloway, the man worth $4.7 billion, the man who had built an empire from nothing. Cedric sat in the front row, flanked by his 3 children. Kendrick, 43, heir to the throne. Imani, 39, federal prosecutor. Darius, 34, the family's conscience. The attorney, a woman named Constance who had served the Holloways for 20 years, cleared her throat. To my beloved husband Cedric, I leave our family home and all marital assets accumulated during our 41 years of marriage. Expected. Proper. The crowd murmured approval. To my children, Kendrick, Imani, and Darius, I leave my love, my blessing, and the knowledge that you were the greatest joy of my life. Tears. Soft applause. Cedric squeezed Imani's hand. Constance paused. Something shifted in her expression. And finally, to Roosevelt Tatum. Cedric's blood turned to ice. Roosevelt Tatum, his driver, the man sitting in the back row right now, in his pressed uniform, exactly where the help was supposed to sit. I leave my entire personal estate, the Savannah property, the Hilton Head beach house, my father's investment portfolio, valued at $7.8 million, and a letter to be read aloud at this gathering explaining why. The cathedral went silent. 800 people stopped breathing. Constance unfolded a piece of paper. Her hands were trembling. My dearest Cedric, if you are reading this, I am gone, and the truth can finally be told. I have carried this weight for 34 years, and I cannot carry it into whatever comes next. She paused, looked at Cedric, then at the 3 children beside him. Kendrick, Imani, and Darius are not your biological children. Their father is Roosevelt. The morning of his wife's memorial service, Cedric Holloway had woken up believing he knew exactly who he was. Self-made billionaire, construction magnate, patriarch of Atlanta's most powerful black family, father of 3, widower of 41 years to his college sweetheart. He had kissed Yolanda's photograph on his nightstand, the way he'd done every morning since she died 37 days ago. Breast cancer had taken her slowly, cruelly, and he had held her hand until the very end. I'll make you proud today, he whispered to the photograph. The whole city will see how much you were loved. He had no idea that in 6 hours, that same city would watch his entire life collapse. Roosevelt Tatum had arrived at exactly 7:43 a.m. to drive Cedric to the cathedral, 17 minutes early, because Roosevelt was never just on time. In 36 years of service, he had never been late once. Good morning, Mr. Holloway, Roosevelt said, opening the rear door of the black Mercedes. I'm sorry for your loss. Mrs. Holloway was a remarkable woman. Thank you, Roosevelt. She always spoke highly of you. If Cedric had been paying attention, really paying attention, he might have noticed something strange in Roosevelt's eyes. A flicker of grief too deep for an employee. A tension in his jaw that spoke of secrets held too long. But Cedric was buried in his own sorrow. He didn't notice anything. He didn't notice that Roosevelt's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went pale. He didn't notice that Roosevelt kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching him with an expression that looked almost like guilt. And he certainly didn't notice the sealed envelope in Roosevelt's breast pocket, the one Yolanda had given him 3 months before she died, with instructions to open it only after the will was read. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then the chaos erupted. Kendrick shot to his feet. This is insane. This is... Mother would never... Imani grabbed Cedric's arm. Daddy, look at me. This has to be a forgery. But Cedric wasn't looking at his children. He was looking at Roosevelt. The driver hadn't moved from his seat in the back row, hadn't flinched when his name was called, hadn't shown a single sign of surprise when the inheritance was announced. Because he already knew. Cedric realized it in that moment. Roosevelt had known this was coming. Maybe for days, maybe for weeks, maybe for 34 years. You, Cedric breathed. The word came out like a knife. You! He was on his feet before he knew he was moving, pushing past Kendrick, shoving through the crowd of stunned socialites and stammering executives. Roosevelt stood as Cedric approached. Didn't back away. Didn't cower. Mr. Holloway, don't! Cedric's voice cracked like thunder. Don't you dare call me that, not now. Not after. He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't put words to the magnitude of what had been done to him. 36 years. Roosevelt had worked for him for 36 years, had driven him to every board meeting, every hospital visit, every family vacation, had been present at his children's graduations, their weddings, the births of their own children, children who were apparently Roosevelt's grandchildren. Did you know? Cedric grabbed Roosevelt by the collar, and gasps rippled through the cathedral. When you drove my son to his first day of high school, did you know he was your son? When you carried my daughter down the aisle at her wedding, did you know you were giving away your own child? Roosevelt met his eyes, didn't look away. Yes, he said quietly. I knew. Cedric's fist connected with Roosevelt's jaw before anyone could stop him. Security pulled them apart. Kendrick was shouting. Imani was crying. Darius stood frozen, staring at Roosevelt with an expression Cedric couldn't read. And then Darius said something that stopped everyone cold. I knew too. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. What? Imani spun to face her younger brother. What did you just say? Darius's face was ashen. I found out 3 years ago. Mom told me. She made me swear to keep it secret until she was gone. Kendrick grabbed Darius by the shoulders. You knew? You knew for 3 years that we weren't, that Dad wasn't. And you said nothing. She was dying, Kendrick. What was I supposed to do? Break her heart by exposing her secret. Break Dad's heart while she was still alive to watch. So you just let us live a lie? We've been living a lie our entire lives. 3 more years didn't seem to matter. Cedric watched his children, Roosevelt's children, tear into each other, and something inside him went numb. Darius had known. His youngest, the one he'd always felt closest to, the one who had inherited his passion for giving back to the community. Darius had known the truth and chosen to protect his mother's secret, which meant Darius had looked Cedric in the eye, every day for 3 years, knowing that everything between them was built on a foundation of lies. Get out, Cedric said. Everyone fell silent. All of you. Get out of my sight. I don't want to see any of you, not you. He pointed at Kendrick and Imani. Not you. At Darius. And especially not you. His finger jabbed at Roosevelt. Get out and don't come back. Daddy, Imani started. You are not my daughter. None of you are my children. You are strangers who have been living in my house, spending my money, and calling me a name I never earned. Now get out. He turned and walked out of the cathedral, leaving 800 witnesses to the most spectacular family implosion Atlanta had ever seen. Cedric didn't leave his study for 3 days. He didn't eat, barely slept. He sat in the darkness, surrounded by 41 years of family photographs, and he tried to find the cracks. How had he missed it? How had he lived with a woman for 4 decades and never suspected she was carrying another man's children? He pulled out photo albums, baby pictures, Christmas mornings, birthday parties, Kendrick at 6 years old, sitting on Cedric's shoulders at Disney World, Imani at 12, accepting a spelling bee trophy with tears of joy in her eyes. Darius at 16, showing Cedric the acceptance letter from Morehouse. In every picture, Cedric saw himself, his pride, his love, his absolute certainty that these children were his legacy. Now he looked closer. Kendrick's eyes, deep set, slightly downturned at the corners, just like Roosevelt's. Imani's jawline, the stubborn set of her shoulders when she was angry, just like Roosevelt. Darius's hands, long fingers, broad palms, the hands of a man who had spent his youth doing physical labor, just like Roosevelt. How had he never seen it? Because he wasn't looking. Because it never occurred to him to look. Because Yolanda had been careful, so careful, to make sure he never had a reason to question. On the third day, Cedric finally emerged from his study. He had a plan. He wasn't just going to accept this. He was going to understand it. And then he was going to destroy everyone who had participated in destroying him. Cedric hired Malachi Stone, the best private investigator in the Southeast, former FBI, connections everywhere, the kind of man who could find out what you ate for breakfast in 1987 if the price was right. "I want everything," Cedric told him. "Every detail of their affair. When it started, how long it lasted. Every lie my wife ever told me. I want to know it all. That could be painful, Mr. Holloway. I'm already in pain. Now I want the truth." A week later, Malachi delivered a file 3 inches thick, and the truth was worse than Cedric had imagined. The affair hadn't started in 1980, like Roosevelt claimed in the Cathedral confrontation. It started in 1978, before Roosevelt was even hired. Cedric read the report 3 times, certain he was misunderstanding. Yolanda and Roosevelt had met at a community center in southwest Atlanta, where Yolanda volunteered tutoring children and Roosevelt coached basketball. They had fallen in love, real love, the kind that burns, before either of them knew Cedric Holloway existed. And then Yolanda's father found out. Reverend Clarence Mitchell, one of the most influential black pastors in Georgia, had plans for his daughter. Big plans. She was going to marry well, elevate the family's social standing, secure the Mitchell legacy for generations. A basketball coach who drove a 10-year-old pickup truck was not part of that plan. Reverend Mitchell gave Yolanda a choice: break off the relationship or be cut off from the family. No inheritance, no support, no father. She chose family. She broke Roosevelt's heart, and 3 months later she married Cedric Holloway, a young, ambitious construction contractor who was going places, a man her father approved of, a man who would give her the life she was supposed to want. But she never stopped loving Roosevelt. When Cedric hired a driver 2 years into their marriage, Yolanda was the one who suggested Roosevelt for the job. She told Cedric he came highly recommended. She never mentioned they had a history, and once Roosevelt was inside the house, inside their life, the affair had resumed within months. Cedric sat with the file open on his desk, staring at the timeline. 1978. Yolanda and Roosevelt fall in love. 1979. They're forced apart by her father. 1980. Yolanda marries Cedric. 1982. Roosevelt is hired as the family driver. 1983. The affair resumes. 1984. Kendrick is born. 1985. Imani is born. 1990. Darius is born. 40 years. Roosevelt had been in love with his wife for 40 years, had slept with her for 36 of those years, had fathered 3 children with her while Cedric was building an empire to support them all. And the worst part, Cedric had paid Roosevelt's salary the entire time, had given him health insurance, a pension, a comfortable life, while Roosevelt repaid him by sleeping with his wife. But there was something else in the file, something that made Cedric's blood run cold. The Savannah property, the beach house, the investment portfolio, None of it had come from Yolanda's family. Reverend Mitchell had disowned his daughter after all. When Yolanda chose to continue her affair with Roosevelt, yes, her father had found out again. He had cut her off completely, written her out of his will, died 5 years ago without ever speaking to her again. The inheritance Yolanda left to Roosevelt. It came from Cedric. Over 41 years of marriage, Cedric had given his wife generous allowances, funded her personal investments, paid for properties he thought were her family legacy. He had trusted her to manage her own finances, never questioning where the money went, and she had used his money to build an estate for her lover. Armed with the file, Cedric went to the Savannah property. Roosevelt was there, of course, living in a house Cedric had unknowingly paid for. "I didn't come here to fight," Cedric said, stepping onto the wraparound porch where Roosevelt sat with a glass of sweet tea. "I came for answers. Real answers, not the sanitized version you gave at the cathedral." Roosevelt set down his glass. His face showed every one of his 64 years. "What do you want to know? Did you love her? More than anything. Did she love you?" "Yes, in her way." "Then why did she marry me?" Roosevelt was quiet for a long moment. "Because you could give her things I couldn't. Security, status, a future her father would approve of. I was a basketball coach making $12,000 a year. You were going to be somebody. So I was the safe choice. You were the expected choice, the right choice, according to everyone who mattered. I was just the one she couldn't let go." Cedric sat down heavily in the chair beside Roosevelt, 2 old men on a porch, one of them holding a file that documented decades of betrayal. "Did she ever plan to tell me?" "No. She was going to take it to her grave. The letter, the will, that was her deathbed decision. I told her not to do it. I begged her to let the secret die with her." "Why?" Roosevelt finally looked at him. "Because I knew it would destroy you. And despite everything, I never wanted that. You slept with my wife for 36 years. You fathered 3 children that I raised as my own. And you never wanted to destroy me. I never wanted any of this, Cedric." It was the first time Roosevelt had ever used his first name. "I wanted to marry Yolanda in 1978 and have a life with her. A simple life. Nothing fancy, just us. But her father wouldn't allow it. And when she married you, I should have walked away, found someone else, built my own family." "Why didn't you?" "Because she asked me not to, and I could never say no to her." Cedric opened the file. "I know about the money," he said. "I know the inheritance didn't come from her family. I know I paid for everything she's leaving you." Roosevelt's expression didn't change. "I told her not to do that either. But you let her. I couldn't stop her. She was determined to give me something, to make up for all the years I spent loving her in secret. I told her it was wrong. I told her it was theft. She said it was justice." "Justice?" "She said you took her from me, that her father sold her to you like property, that the life she lived with you was payment for a debt she never owed. The inheritance was her way of balancing the scales. That's insane." "I know." Cedric threw the file on the table between them. "There's something else you should see. Page 47. Roosevelt hesitated. Then he picked up the file, flipped to the page, and went absolutely still. "Who else knows about this?" he asked quietly. "Just me, and now you." On the page was a medical record, a test result from 1992. Yolanda had been pregnant. Again. For the 4th time. But this pregnancy had ended, differently. A procedure at a private clinic in South Carolina. No record in Georgia. Paid for in cash. The father, according to notes from a confidential consultation, was not her husband. She terminated my child, Roosevelt whispered. She was carrying my baby and she ended it. Because 3 children was already too many. Because another pregnancy would have raised questions. Because she had already taken as much as she could without getting caught. Roosevelt closed the file. His hands were shaking. I didn't know, he said. I swear to you, I didn't know about this. Does it change anything? It changes everything. I spent 40 years believing she loved me, that what we had was real. But this, he couldn't finish. Cedric understood. In that moment, he understood completely. They had both been victims of Yolanda Mitchell Holloway. Different kinds of victims, but victims nonetheless. She had used Cedric for his money, his status, his ability to give her the life her father demanded. She had used Roosevelt for his love, his devotion, his willingness to remain in the shadows, and in the end, she had destroyed them both. The next week, Cedric received 3 letters. The first was from Kendrick. Dad, I don't know what to call you anymore, but that's the word that feels right. You raised me. You taught me everything I know about business, about integrity, about being a man. I don't care what the DNA says. You are my father. Please let me come home. The second was from Imani. Daddy, I'm so sorry. Not for what happened. None of us chose this. But for the pain it's caused you. I've spent my career prosecuting people who lie and cheat and destroy lives. I never thought I'd be the product of that same destruction. But you're still the man who taught me to fight for justice. That will never change. The third was from Darius. I don't expect your forgiveness. I kept Mom's secret because I loved her, but I knew it was wrong. I knew what it would do to you when the truth came out. I chose her over you, and I have to live with that. But I want you to know something. Mom didn't tell me because she was proud of what she'd done. She told me because she was dying, and she was afraid. Afraid that when the truth came out, we would all hate her. She asked me to help you understand why she did what she did. I told her I couldn't do that. Some things are unforgivable. She cried. It was the only time I ever saw her cry. Cedric called a meeting. Not at the mansion, not at the office, at the Savannah property. The house Roosevelt now owned, legally, irrevocably. They all came. Kendrick with his wife, Imani with her daughters, Darius with his partner, and Roosevelt standing uncomfortably in his own home, waiting to see what the man he had betrayed for 40 years would say. I've made some decisions, Cedric said. He looked older than he had 6 months ago, thinner, but his voice was strong. First, I will never forgive Yolanda. She used both of us. He glanced at Roosevelt. For different purposes, but she used us just the same. I loved her, and that love was based on lies. I can't forgive that. He paused. Second, I will not punish her children for her sins. Kendrick will remain CEO of the real estate division. Imani will chair the foundation we're establishing in Yolanda's name. And yes, I know how ironic that is. Darius will receive permanent funding for his non-profit. My will remains unchanged. You are still my heirs. Kendrick exhaled. Imani wiped her eyes. Darius looked at the floor. Third, Roosevelt stays. Everyone stared. Not as my driver, not as my employee, as family. That's what Yolanda wanted. She wanted us all to be together, even though she knew it would mean exposing everything. I hated her for it. I still hate her for it, but I understand it now. You understand it? Imani asked. She was dying. She knew she wouldn't have to face the consequences, and she wanted to set things right, in her own, broken, selfish way. She wanted Roosevelt to be acknowledged. She wanted you 3 to know where you came from. She wanted me to understand that our marriage, however flawed, produced something worth saving. Cedric turned to Roosevelt. I will never like you. I will probably never trust you. But you're the father of 3 people I love, and that means something. It has to mean something. Otherwise, what was any of it for? Roosevelt's eyes were wet. I don't deserve this. No, you don't. But my children do. And they deserve a father who doesn't have to hide in the shadows anymore. Later that evening, Cedric stood alone on the porch of the Savannah house. Constance, the attorney, approached him with an envelope. There was one more document, she said. Yolanda asked me to give it to you only if you accepted the family. All of the family. Cedric opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph. Yolanda and Roosevelt, young and radiant, standing in front of a little white church. Yolanda wore a simple dress. Roosevelt wore a suit that didn't fit quite right. On the back, in Yolanda's handwriting, our wedding day. October 14th, 1978. 2 witnesses. No family, no money, just love. And below that, we were married before I ever met you, Cedric. I never told anyone. Not even Roosevelt knows I kept this picture. But I wanted you to understand. I didn't choose between you and him. I was his first. I was always his. I just didn't know how to be his and survive. So I became yours instead. I'm sorry. For everything. Cedric stared at the photograph for a long time. Then he walked inside and handed it to Roosevelt without a word. He watched Roosevelt's face as the truth dawned. Watched 40 years of uncertainty dissolve into something like peace. She was your wife, Cedric said. Legally. Before she was ever mine. I didn't know, Roosevelt whispered. She never told me she kept. We were so young. I thought it was just a ceremony. Not. It was real, which means my marriage was never valid, which means the children were never illegitimate, which means everything she left me, it was always mine. No. Cedric shook his head. What she left you was guilt money, payment for 40 years of lies. But this, he pointed at the photograph, this is something else. This is proof that she loved you, that whatever else she did, whatever other lies she told, that part was real. Roosevelt clutched the photograph like a lifeline. What happens now? He asked. Cedric looked out the window at his family, at Roosevelt's family, at the complicated mess of people Yolanda had created and destroyed, and somehow, impossibly, brought together. Now, he said, we figure out how to live with the truth. He turned and walked out to join his children on the lawn. And for the first time in 6 months, he let himself imagine a future that didn't begin with the word betrayal. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start.